I just want to kind of get some basic cuts here. And the fluid that you see coming
you
out...
guys gather around on either side of her if you want. Just make sure you get a good look.
There's a fluid that's in here that's keeping the pig preserved, and that's what's coming out. Let me just tell you a few things about this pig. First of all, you can see that it has its snout right here, and it has nostrils, just like we have nostrils to take in air. It has a mouth right at this end, and it also has an eye. It has eyelids. The blue stuff is dye that they put in so that we can see the blood vessels when we open it up. But just to show you a little bit, the pig has teeth. I can feel them with my gloves. There's some right there, and there's some under the tongue. It has a kind of a ridged roof, sort of like we do, in the roof of its mouth.
Yeah, push in next to Anna. Just squeeze right in there. I want you to make sure you can see.
And I'm going to just open this up a little bit more. Now, basically, this is a female pig. That was the other thing I wanted to mention. You can see it has toes. It has wrists, just like we have wrists. It has knees. It has ankles. So there are similarities. This is its umbilical cord. Just like all of you have an umbilicus or a belly button, well, you had a cord like this when you were inside your mom's. And if you were...
And that's also, you only find that in what are called placental mammals. So that was attached to a placenta, which kind of, I guess, better communicated with your mom's body, sort of like, interfaced with your mom.
It has blood vessels in it that brings nutrients down into the baby, and it has a tube that also will take some of the liquid wastes away. And let me just open the pig up a little bit more, and we can talk a little bit more about what's actually here, because I want you to be able to see. There are two main cavities that I want to point out. One is in the chest cavity. That's called the thoracic cavity, and that contains the heart and the lungs. And then there's this ridge of tissue called the diaphragm, which encloses that thoracic cavity, and it's a muscular piece that helps you with your breathing. It pulls the cavity down and up as you're breathing. The bottom part is called the abdominal cavity, and that holds the digestive organs as well as the reproductive organs. And so let me get this opened up here.
And so why two body cavities inside of an animal? You've got the thoracic, that's this part of your body, right up here, from here on up. Your diaphragm on up is your thoracic cavity. Everything below that is called your abdominal cavity, okay?
Okay. As you can see, just to point out, as the umbilicus, the umbilical cord goes through the skin, and it continues on into the inside of the pig, and it carries those blood vessels that bring blood to the baby. And also, this other thing right here, remember we couldn't find the bladder yesterday? I found the bladder. The bladder is connected to there's a tube in here called the, and I'm not going to pronounce it well, but I think it's called the allantoin or allantoin. And it carries liquid wastes out from the baby. And that is connected to what will become the bladder in an adult pig. And that is, you have a vein, you have an artery, which is pink, and you have a bladder right here. So let me just cut away. What I'm cutting away is muscle tissue. And if you go to college, you will actually do this slowly. And first you will take the skin off. And let me just show you one little thing real quick, if I can, about the skin. I'm going to cut away. And all this stuff that looks like saran wrap, that is a connective tissue. That just holds all the organs in place. And what I wanted to do was show you a little piece of skin so you can see just how close the blood vessels are to the surface of the skin. And I'll try to just cut this away really quick. There we go. And what I'm pulling away is connective tissue and muscle. And what I end up with is a very thin little flap of skin when you pull away all the other tissues. And this piece doesn't show it so well. There's a little tiny pink spot right there. I don't know if anybody can see it.
I can see it.
And what the pink spot is it's a blood vessel. You know how you cut your skin and you don't necessarily have to get stitches, but you're going to bleed an awful lot? That's because you have blood vessels not just deep in your body, but also right near the surface of the skin. So I wanted you to be able to see that. Now let me just remove this muscle here and open up the abdominal cavity more, because I wanted to focus on things like the digestive tract and important body organs. So just give me a second here. Okay. So now I'm going to just cut off the umbilicus right now, but this right here is the umbilicus inside of the pig. So you can see it takes you down into the bladder right there. Now let me cut away on this side, and we'll be able to see momentarily things like the heart, the lungs, the stomach, all those important pieces.
If you can't see, just kind of push in a little bit. There's a space right over here if you're not getting a good view. You can kind of get in that corner right there if you want. You can get a better view. So.
Now you notice that this has got many layers here. Let me cut off a piece of this and I'll show you. Now, what you can see is you can see a little better on this. There's connective tissue, there's layers of muscle, and very close to the skin, you see all those little pink lines? Okay? Those are just another example of how many blood vessels are right under the surface of your skin. So, let me cut this away now so we can have a good view of the...
Do you have your scissors there?
I think I left them over at the other table. But I'm using the scalpel quickly to open up the cavity. Let me open up the chest.
After, so let's just hit the major organs.
That's what I'm going to do, yeah. The heart, the liver, the kidneys, those sorts of things. As a matter of fact, right now, I've got the chest cavity opened up. And believe me, a surgeon would be doing this a whole lot slower and a whole lot nicer because he would not want to be causing you any pain or any damage. I want to open this up quickly because I want you to see some things. Okay. All right, for example, ribs. Feel your chest. Feel the sides of you. You can feel ribs, right? Well, the same with the pig. The ribs are coming from the spine all the way around, and the ribs are there to protect some very important structures that we have here in the chest cavity. So let me just open this up. But I wanted you to be able to see. And in between all the ribs is a bunch of muscular tissue and some more blood vessels. But what we've got right here, and I'll bet, can anybody tell me what I'm cutting very close to? Anybody have any ideas?
That is esophagus, what's it called? The heart.
Yeah.
The heart. I'm very close to the heart, and I'm also very close to something else called the lungs. Right here.
Okay, guys in the back there, I want you to be able to see this part, so kind of push in there a little bit. If you can't see, get where you can see, because I want you to see she's got the heart exposed and the lungs right now. So kind of...
Okay, let me just trim this and I'll be able to pull them up forward. There. Okay, so now you can see in the chest, this is the thoracic cavity. These little floppy things right here, these are all pieces, these are all lobes of the lung. You have an upper lobe and a lower lobe. You have right and left lungs. So as you can see, there's the lungs, and I'm going to just very quickly,
This young man right back there in the red shirt cannot see, so
okay.
let's try to make sure he can see.
All right.
How do you know?
Let's see, here. Let me move over just a little bit here. And this way, can everybody see a little bit better? Have you got a space to be? Okay, good. Here are the lungs, and if you notice, the lungs are connected to the heart. Anybody want to tell me why?
So the blood can get a heart to get oxygenated?
Yes, because the basic thing is you have blood vessels from all over the body that are bringing blood to the heart that are in need of oxygen. And it brings the blood into the heart, and then it pumps it out of the heart to the lungs. The lungs oxygenate the blood and send it back to the heart, which then sends it back out to the rest of the body. So let me just trim this. And I can free it so that we can see. Well, the intestines sure look like spaghetti, that's for sure. And this little floppy layer underneath here, this keeps the peritoneal cavity enclosed and separate from the heart and lungs. It's a little piece of tissue. But let me just pull this out and cut it out so we can see it better.
Were you talking about the sac around the heart?
Yeah.
Is that what you're
Well,
talking
the sac, there's a sac around the heart and lungs, and there is a sac that is also around your intestinal organs, and that keeps them separate. Anyway, very quickly, you can see there's a major blood vessel, the aorta, that's going to the rest of the body to bring oxygenated blood. There's also, and I don't have it, oh yes, there it is. There's a vein right there. And that is, one of its names is the vena cava. It brings all of the blood from the body that needs oxygen into one of the, and these are called atrium, and we had a discussion yesterday. You will see in your drawing, sometimes they call it atrium, sometimes they call it auricle. Auricle is an older term, and actually auricle is now used to describe a portion of that top chamber. And what that does is it collects the blood from the body, it pushes it down into the bottom part, which is called the ventricle. The ventricle is this huge muscle, and it pumps it out through some of these blood vessels to the lungs. The lungs oxygenate the blood, sends it back to the other auricle on the other side, and pumps it out to the rest of the body. Now let me just very quickly, because I know we don't have a lot of time, I want to show you just how muscular that heart is.
Yeah, just watch
Okay,
this right there.
now take a look at that. You think of the heart as an empty thing, you know, that has these big spaces. What that ventricle part down below is it's all muscle. This is why they call the heart a muscle, because as you can see, there's a lot of blood vessels coming in and out.
Right. Do you guys understand that the colors in there, that's where the blood is? That represents the blood. That's the open spaces.
Right. And all that other tissue around it is a strong muscle that is used. That's why your heart is called a pump. It pumps the blood to the body, it pumps the blood to the lungs. All it does is pump all day long and all night long.
By the way, so pig blood ain't red.
I don't know.
Yes, pig blood is red.
Well,
Yeah.
why is all this stuff, she's cutting all this stuff up?
What happened was they drained out all the blood, and then
put
they
it
injected
dry.
it with this latex, like this rubbery liquid stuff, different colors, so that we'd be able to see it. Because if they didn't do that, the blood would just turn black, or it just wouldn't be very visible. So they used dyes, injected dyes in there. So.
All right. I just cut one of the lobes of the lungs open. And if you'll see that there's a lot of pink and blue blood vessels, and then you'll see there's a couple of little things that have a hole right in the middle. I don't know if you can see it very well, but let me use this guy. Right here. This is one of the things called the bronchial tubes, and when you inhale, air goes down your throat into the bronchial tube, and it sends it into all of the lung tissue, and then all these little blood vessels will get the oxygen that's coming down. It will get the oxygen from the air coming down your bronchial tubes, and it will go into the capillaries and into the blood, and then back to the heart. And I'm really sorry that I'm having to hurry because this is not giving us a lot of time to explore, but suffice it to say that the heart is a very strong muscle. It is connected strongly to the lungs. That's all about the process of getting oxygen to and from all your body tissues. What we have down in the lower cavity here is this huge thing here. Anybody have any idea what this is right here?
Liver?
That is the liver. And it too has a number of lobes, and it's one of the largest organs in the body. And the liver is involved in a number of things. You know, it is involved in processing. If you have to take medicine, say you had a strep throat and you had to take an antibiotic, well, you know, you have to also get what's left of that antibiotic out of your body. The liver does a lot of that cleaning of the blood. It takes out chemicals. It also is involved in a lot of things like cholesterol levels and some hormone levels. So the liver has a lot of, and they have not yet been able to come up with an artificial liver. So livers you cannot live without. So there is also a little organ underneath the liver. Let me see if I can pull it up right here. And you can see there's an awful lot of blood vessels. Let me just cut one of these liver lobes open. All of the blood in the body will go through the liver. And if you look at that, is there any doubt that all the blood in the body goes through? Because the liver is predominantly blood vessels that come to be cleansed, bringing blood to be cleansed, and then it goes back into the tissue and out to the rest of the body. So let me just free that up a little bit. Underneath the liver, and I'm trying to find it here, it's kind of this little sac right here, okay, and this is called the gallbladder. And what you basically have is you have an esophagus. The food comes down your throat. It comes down into this first sac right here, which let me free the liver from it and I can show you. The liver sits on top of everything, but the food comes down the esophagus and first of all comes into this organ, which is a little sac. Anybody want to tell me what this is?
I don't know, the large intestine?
No, this little sac right here. This is the stomach. And the food comes down into the stomach. It comes through, and I'm trying to find if there's a piece of the esophagus that's handy or not, but basically it comes into the stomach. It proceeds down into the intestines through, and there is this, it's not easy to see, but I'm going to try to free it a little bit. The stomach is right here. And then it starts to come down, and there's, you can't feel it, but there's this incredibly muscular gate called the pyloric sphincter that prevents any of the food from leaving the stomach and going into the intestine until it has been mixed with the hydrochloric acid and the stomach enzymes. And then that sphincter will open, and it starts down its journey into the small intestine. Now, the other thing that sits right under the stomach, which you can see it's a little green right here, there's something that's called the pancreas. And the pancreas shoots in insulin and some other digestive enzymes to help digest the food. And basically, you can think of the whole digestive tract as a highway. And the food comes down the initial on-ramp, which is the esophagus, into the ramp onto the highway, which is the stomach. And then it gets onto the highway, which is going through your small intestine and also your large intestine. And along the way, various things are shot into the material in your intestine to help digest it. So what you have is the pancreas shooting in some insulin. You have the gallbladder under the liver, which is shooting in something called bile, which helps to digest fats. And then you also have stretches, and I'll try to pull some of this intestine out just so you can see a little better. Now, what you notice about this intestine is how much, there may be 20 feet of intestine here, but you will never know it because of the way it's all wrapped together. It's like a Christmas package. You can't get it open, you know. There is, I'll try to pull this aside. Can you see the pink color in that material? That's called mesenchyme, that shiny stuff with the pink. And mesenchyme is just sort of like putting a whole lot of Glad or Saran wrap all around the intestines to hold everything in place and have your blood vessels go through there to reach your intestines. Because in order to extract nutrients out of the material in the intestines, you have to have a very well-developed blood network that can take the chemicals out of the food, bring it into the bloodstream, and bring it to the parts of your body. So that's what you've got going on right there. And I'm just...
Yeah, and it's just not very visible in here, but I used to hunt a lot and stuff, and we were cleaning, like we'd have squirrels or rabbits. In a freshly killed animal, when you're cleaning it out, the intestines will just pull apart very easily and long. It's a giant long tube. It's just this one long continuous tube. In here, it doesn't look like it's a long tube because it's all wrapped around each other. But
right. But here you can see, as I'm starting to free it, there, you know, from this mesenchyme, which holds it in place, you can see that it's a long tube. In humans, I'm trying to remember, is it something like 20 feet or is it longer? I forget what the small intestine is, but it's feet. So just, you know, and then, anyway, the food, is it something like that? I knew it was in that order of magnitude. So basically, the food comes into the stomach, comes through the pyloric sphincter, the pancreas adds in its part, the gallbladder adds in its part, it goes through this small intestine, which is all convoluted and wrapped around, and as it's going through the small intestine, it's continuing to take out nutrients, and then it proceeds down into the part of the body that is known as the large intestine or the colon. And we see, you can see that the small intestine has a much thinner tubing. You know, it's kind of like the difference between a PVC pipe that's little and a big, huge one. But there's your small intestine, and over here is your large. Okay? And again, it's all wrapped tightly. But let me try to open this up a little bit. And you can see that it, too, it's just like the earthworm. It has material that, as it goes along the way, is getting more and more digested, compacted, water's being pulled out, broken down. Thank you, Bob. That's a good word. And, you know, so here and there you can see, again, I accidentally cut into it, so you can see. Now, in a fetal animal, this would probably be called meconium, just like in a baby, because it's basically nutrients coming from the mother as opposed to during life when it's eating corn and grain and anything else. So let me get down through the liver. Let me take the liver out of here. I wanted you to be able to see the kidneys. That's coming up next. Stay tuned. And as I said, you know, you'll be able to use your diagrams at home to look in better detail at this. But, you know, it's very different to look at a diagram than it is to actually look at it as it is in a real animal. Here's part of the esophagus, by the way, and that would continue all the way up into the throat. So that's the esophagus. And I'm getting down close to the kidneys. What you can also see as I'm cutting away here is this hard material. Anybody want to tell me what this is back here?
Spine.
That is the spinal cord. And what you've got is it's very hard, but you've got cartilage that is in between each one of these structures called a vertebrae. And remember how we found that thin little cord of nerve in the earthworm? Mm-hmm. Well, in the pig, the brain is up here, and you have a much thicker cord of nerve fibers that are coming down the inside of those vertebrae. And the other thing is those nerves are going off in all directions to all the various muscles and body organs to tell them what to do, the instructions from the brain. So how are we doing for time? Okay, we're doing all right. What I want to do is get down to the kidneys. So I'm going to, and you can see, Mother Nature has sure wrapped everything. If Mother Nature were doing Christmas presents, you'd never get them open. So let me just take all of this out here. And what we come down to, and if you notice something about this, unlike the earthworm where everything was mostly on one level, there's layers that we're going down through because the pig is not flat, so you have organs on top of organs on top of organs. So right now, what we've got down here, let me just empty out some of the liquid, is we have 2 kidneys tucked away.
Before you take those out, can you kind of do what you just did with your hands, like move your hands to the side and pick it up so they can kind of see it in its...
Okay. Let me cut some more of this connective tissue. All right, so here we can see.
You guys see that, Matthew, Anna?
These 2 little, they look like little coffee beans. Those are the kidneys. And the kidneys, let me just trim away here a little bit. Okay, so here you can see, here's one of the kidneys, and it's connected to this tube called a ureter, and the ureter comes down, and what the kidney processes the liquid waste in your bodies. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the kidney in a moment, but essentially when the kidney's done its job, any of the waste liquid comes down the ureter and comes into the bladder area, which is down here, and then would be excreted out through the bottom of the pig. So let me just, and as you can see, it kind of comes down the same pathway. This is the colon right here, which would lead to the anus. So it's right in the same vicinity. So there's your colon, there's your ureter, and here's a kidney. And what I want to do is free one of the kidneys and just cut it open briefly. We're looking at maybe a class at some point where we actually get things like a sheep brain and a pig kidney so that you can see a little bit better the actual inner structures of these organs. But let me just do this very carefully and see if I can cut into this. I'll try the scissors. Okay, now what I did was I just kind of cut the top half of this kidney off. And there is a cortex in the kidney, which is the outer part, and then something called the medulla in the middle, and then you see there's like a hole. And what happens is the blood vessels come into the cortex, and any waste products, any chemicals, because aside from the liver, the other place in the body that processes and excretes some chemicals is the kidney. And so keeping a proper balance of salt in your body, making sure you have enough water in your body, but not so much that you blow up and get all bloated. The kidney does a lot of that work right in the cortex, and then it starts to funnel the waste liquids down into the part underneath, which is right around here, and that's called the medulla. And what that has is little sacs that continue to refine the process, pull out any salts that's too much, pull out the urea, send some water back, because the kidney's job is also to make sure that you're left with enough water in your body. And there are some disease states, for example, where if the kidney can't do that, you end up being either dehydrated or you have too much water in your body. So it's an important job. This hole in the center, it works from the inside, from the outside in. When the cortex and the medulla have done their jobs, the remaining liquid waste funnels into the central area, which is then connected to your ureter, which sends the urine onto your bladder. And then that's basically a very short version of the kidney. Let's see, what else? I would love to be able to take the brain out to show you, but I would suggest that you look at your diagrams or look at some of the websites for the pig, because what I want you to see, most importantly, is the difference between what we found for a brain or didn't find for a brain in the earthworm and what you see in, for example, something like a pig. Because next week when we do the frog, we're going to, it has a very similar internal structure. That was partly the reason we wanted to do this today, so you could have a view of this is a mammal. You can see that it has hair on the outside, but it's also a vertebrate. It has a spinal column, and so does a frog. Even though a frog is not a mammal, it's a vertebrate. It has a similar body structure internally. And I wanted you to see what that kind of a setup looks like compared to the earthworm. So that next week we'll be prepared to come in here, we'll open up the skin and the muscles, and we'll start to go and look at all the various, and we'll take our time so that we have a lot of time for you to examine all the organs in the frog.
So
am I missing anything, Bob?
No, that's good. So you guys will be doing your own frogs at your table, like you did your own earthworm today. And the frogs that you're going to get are also going to have colors on the inside because they're what they call triple injected. They injected all the major, like the blood vessels and then I think the lymphatic system and stuff. So you should see different colors in there as well. It makes it easier to tell what's what inside your frog. But you're going to actually be doing all the cutting and dissecting and finding your liver and heart and kidneys inside of your frog. So be prepared for that next week. But today, like I said, you're doing that earthworm. If you can do that earthworm successfully, which you all did, it's going to be a piece of cake for you to do the frog. Yeah.
And we'll have a couple of things available, like on that table over there, just so you can kind of not just look at diagrams, but some three-dimensional models of the frog, and just sort of see where the various things are, as you're doing your dissection. So we'll take our time, we'll go through it slowly, and what I want to do when we tie it up next week at the very end is to take those charts, which is why if you really could do this for me, do your earthworm and do your pig. Check off what you found for organs, so that next week we can do that with the frog, and then at the end of the class we're going to just kind of go down that chart and compare how the different organs are present or not present, and any other things we noticed along the way, like, well, yes, the pig has a brain and so does the worm, but they are not the same. So I appreciate all your attention. It's lunchtime.
Make sure everybody,
wash your hands.
Although this is a non-toxic kind of thing, you've been messing around with a dead animal, so wash your hands really well at a bathroom and stuff and everything. So, but everything else on your tables, you can just leave it. Just take. They're taking these with them, right? They're taking their dissection.